Welcome to everyone tuning in for our webinar. We're just going to give it a few seconds for everyone to join before we begin. All right, well, good morning and welcome to Harnessing the Power of AI, What It Means for Tourism and Hospitality. I'm Mitra Sorrells, Editor-in-Chief at FocusWire, and we are delighted to be co-hosting this webinar with our friends at Miles Partnership on what continues to be the hottest topic across travel and tourism, artificial intelligence. We have a great group of panelists and participants lined up for you today. Along with myself, we have Gray Lowry from Miles Partnership, my colleague Mike Coletta from Focusrite, Marina Petrova from Intentful, Kara Franker from Visit Estes Park, and Smith Codio from Microsoft. Let's just quickly run through what we will be discussing today. Of course, we'll be covering some of what's new in AI. We will discuss AI progress and plunders, and then have our panelist discussion, as well as time for Q&A. So please, we welcome your questions. Put those in the Q&A tab, and we will get to as many of those as we can at the end. And also, in the next couple of days, all of those registered will receive a link to watch this on demand, as well as a list of resources on the topic. So I want to begin with some of the news that we have been covering at FocusWire. I'm going to quickly run through some of these recent headlines. All of these are accessible on our website at the link that will be in the resource list. Certainly one of the most interesting and relevant to this audience, in early March, OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, and the City of Dublin, Ireland, announced a partnership that is intended to demonstrate how this technology can be used to provide a personalized experience for visitors. This partnership is starting with the creation of an itinerary planner built on GPT-4 that they intend to be a model for others to use. And then in September, OpenAI and the Dublin officials will be hosting a workshop for leaders of tourism destinations across the European Union on how to use AI for promotion, destination branding, tourism engagement, and itinerary planning. This is certainly interesting because it's the first instance that we have heard about that involves OpenAI itself helping to create a tourism tool, and we will be watching to see if they establish similar partnerships with DMOs here in the US. Also related to in-destination experiences, a startup called WeGoTrip last month announced it is offering digital audio tours created and voiced by generative AI for more than 300 cities around the world. The users put in the parameters as far as the language, the length of the tour, and their personal interest, and then the system generates the tour, and WeGoTrip staff review it for accuracy before they then send it to the customer within 48 hours, and it includes a map that displays the route with navigation. Kayak, also in the news, certainly one of the early adopters when it came to ChatGPT. They were one of the first brands to create a plugin last spring. Now Kayak is using generative AI to offer flight fare comparison through screenshots using ChatGPT's image recognition capabilities. And we are certainly following that story and eager to hear what they are seeing there as far as adoption. It just launched last month. On the hospitality front, Marriott is testing an AI search tool to match travelers with properties in its Homes and Villas vacation rental brand. And shortly after that, IHG announced it is working with Google to launch a generative AI-powered travel planning service later this year. Another startup to watch, Mindtrip. We covered their funding last fall. Just yesterday, they announced the full launch of their trip planning platform that creates itineraries with bookable links through their partnerships with Priceline and Viator. And you can read about that today on FocusWire. And finally, we expect to hear more about Airbnb's integration of generative AI following its acquisition last fall of a startup, Game Planner AI. So the big question on everyone's mind is still, what results are travel stakeholders seeing from their use of generative AI? Earlier this year, we reached out to some of the earliest adopters to find out, in fact, what they're seeing as far as results. A couple to mention: Trip.com told us that users of its Trip Genie tool have double the conversion rate for bookings compared to those that don't use the tool. And Make My Trip told us that conversion rates among users of its AI tools are significantly higher than those not using the tools. And I think now, as we are well into year 2 of some of the brands using this technology, we will certainly start to hear more about some of these ROI data points. And finally, of course, Google continues to make a lot of news with its AI updates. Of course, the big one is Gemini, and my colleague Mike Coletta will be talking about that in a few minutes. But just a couple of others to mention. In March, Google announced an update for its generative AI created itineraries in search that displays options for flights, hotels, and attractions. And it has also refined its core ranking system to eliminate what a spokesperson described to us as low quality AI generated content that is designed to attract clicks, but that doesn't add much original value. Last week, in fact, Google said that this update that they just did last month has helped to reduce this type of unoriginal content in search results by 45%. So that is a quick roundup of some of the recent headlines. And now I'd like to bring in my colleague, Mike Coletta, to share some of Focusrite's latest research and what he's keeping an eye on related to generative AI. Mike?
Yes, thanks, Mitra. Yeah, so the space has certainly been very active in terms of companies hustling to roll out generative AI solutions for travelers, but what do travelers themselves think? Well, last summer in a survey, Focusrite asked travelers in the US and across Europe various questions about their familiarity with and use of generative AI. So this first chart shows both familiarity on the bars, meaning they've at least heard of generative AI, and active usage on the blue line, meaning they've tried or used tools like ChatGPT or DALL-E. And we clearly see both the highest familiarity with and use of generative AI is in the US, where just about 80% of travelers had at least heard of it, and 22% had tried or used it. And we saw the lowest familiarity in the UK at 67%, but lowest usage in France and Germany at 13% each, and both the UK and Italy right there also at 14% each. And then we also asked those who said they are familiar with generative AI if they'd be comfortable planning a trip using it. And so those who said they'd be extremely or at least somewhat comfortable using it to plan a trip varied pretty greatly. It was highest in the US at 50%, lower in Canada at 41%, and lowest in France and Germany at 30 and 35% respectively, which, overall, I would say represents pretty strong interest. But we just got some data in from surveys in Europe fielded just a few weeks ago. So this slide is showing online resources actually used for researching and selecting travel components. And this is referring to products like air, hotel, car, etc., but also selecting a destination. So this is just Europe, but what we see is that across the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, OTAs and general search are still clearly the leading resources, followed by travel review platforms, short-term rental platforms, suppliers, and so on. And all the way to the right is generative AI platforms at only 4 or 5% of travelers that said they actually used them. So this was surprising to me because last year we saw that strong intent to plan trips. But then when we asked what they're actually doing, it seems like they're not really following through, at least in Europe for now. Follow through will likely be stronger in the US, and we'll be fielding that survey in the coming months. But I wouldn't expect a whole lot higher. But I think this should not deter travel companies from forging ahead with generative AI products and solutions because we expect the demand to be there. It just takes time for mass adoption to happen. And it will happen as the tools get more useful and trustworthy. So speaking of that, as Mitra mentioned, I think Google's latest updates to Gemini are something to keep a very close eye on. On this slide is that announcement from about a month ago about how Google is specifically focusing on helping travelers build itineraries using AI and Gemini. And on the right is a screenshot of how in the upgraded Gemini Advanced product currently, there is native integration to cross-reference your own email from Gmail and files from Google Drive. and Google's Flights and Hotels products, and Google Maps and YouTube, all of which are very commonly used for travel planning. And you just type the @ symbol to call any one of these, and you can pull information from any of those sources right into the chat environment and interact with it. So I think this product's important as far as how people may increasingly plan their travel in the future, because Google already has most of the world's information in their index. Now they're offering native integration with major travel products for real-time prices. I would think tours and other products would be coming eventually, and as well as a calendar integration. And then there's everything they know about people that can be used for personalization. And then what else do we have our eye on that's on the horizon? Well, we think autonomous agents are probably the next big thing. And if you're not familiar, this is referring to generative AI software that can not just give you information, but also take action on your behalf, such as scheduling a meeting, making a restaurant reservation, or booking a flight or hotel. And in the news, travel is very commonly given as an example of what autonomous agents will be able to do. But the longer term thing to think about, I think is super interesting, is with autonomous agents, how they may affect the marketing funnel in the long term. Because some of the visions for these represent a near total upheaval of the shopping and buying process. So one vision is that we'd have our own personal agents that would broadcast our needs to the market, and they would interact with agents from sellers, and the agents would sort of negotiate, and your agent would make sure you got the best deal that fully meets your specified needs. So, we're talking years down the road, and I wish I had more time to go into that, but I want to make sure I have a minute to also just touch on the other big one, which is robots. We all talk mostly about generative AI in terms of software, but humanoid robots are coming, and they'll be powered by generative AI too. So this is an article from the beginning of the year about Mobile Aloha, a robot that can do quite complex tasks requiring good dexterity. And some of the examples given there are cooking shrimp, pushing chairs, using a cabinet, wiping wine, calling an elevator, and high-fiving. So I just think it's important to start thinking about autonomous agents and robots in terms of how further automation will affect your corner of the industry, including possibly the impact on jobs, especially in hospitality, in relation to robots for tasks like cooking and cleaning. So I know we want to keep moving, but just a quick note, we'll be fielding at Focusrite a traveler survey soon on their use of technology, and we're accepting proposals for custom questions to put into that survey. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can scan the QR code here in the deck. Thanks, and back to you, Mitra.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. I know we're here to talk about travel and tourism, but the thought of a robot doing my cooking and cleaning really piques my interest. So we'll have to talk more about that. Okay, so we now have a couple of survey questions. We want to kind of get a sense of where all of you stand on the topic of AI. So first question, how would you describe your organization's investment of time and money into AI? And please just pick one of those options there. Are you just learning, doing some testing, significant testing, testing and modest implementation, or testing and fuller implementations, or not sure? We'll give just a few seconds for that one. Okay. And then we can go on to the next one there. Which areas or use cases in your organization are testing or implementing AI? And you can choose more than one for this survey question. So you'll see the choices there: content marketing and advertising. That's certainly something we hear quite a bit about. Trip planning and booking support, customer service, software development, another area. You can certainly add your idea into the chat, or not sure. Okay, I think everybody's probably had time to answer those questions. Why don't we take a look at what we have for the results? Let's see. So still, the majority in the very early stages, what is that, about 69% are either just learning or just starting to do some testing. Much smaller percentage actually doing some implementations. And then when we look at how it's being used, yeah, not a big surprise there that the content marketing and advertising functions are using it the most right now. That aligns with what we're hearing from everyone we talk to. Trip planning and booking support and customer service, of course, also two very big use cases. Great. And now I would like to hand it over to Gray Lowry from Miles Partnership. Gray.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mitra. All right. All right, so we're going to get into this and move pretty fast so everyone can get a copy of the slides and recording. But essentially what I wanted to do was look at some of the highlights and lowlights of AI over the last year and this year, and then some of the things that we have learned at Miles Partnership through some of the testing efforts. So 2023, the last time we were having this conversation, ChatGPT 4 had just come out, and we've seen a lot of things that have also happened along the way. Runway from a video perspective in their partnership with Getty, Adobe's Firefly release, the move to multimodal, Microsoft's Copilots being released, Google releasing Bard, Gemini, getting rid of the Bard and Duet, getting rid of those, and then going full Gemini. We've seen amazing songs from the Beatles that have been released through them. And then also sort of on the side, the Drake and Weeknd songs, Heart on My Sleeve, which were not licensed by them, but also generated. Just to highlight, I like using AI for a lot of ideation, and here are just a list of alternate title slides that came up when I was putting this together. A great use of AI is sort of that idea generation, not the final work product, but the idea of what is something I can do. And I found that subheadings within slides is a perfect use for generative AI. Outside of what we saw in 2023, 2024 brings massive investments, $4 billion from Amazon. Apple has committed to $10 billion. Google, I think, is already at $30 billion so far this year and projects to spend up to $50 billion. And then Microsoft and OpenAI playing of $100 billion investment in that huge, massive data center that they've been looking at. And so while things are up, we've also seen things that have been less, exciting. Deep fakes of Elon Musk or Pope Francis or Taylor Swift, and how long it's taken for those things to come down and the impact that they've had on things like elections. In addition to that, we've started to see this whole, the legal challenges from the New York Times, as well as some of the stuff with Soren and OpenAI. So this inconsistency or variability on the legality of the AI space. And then finally, we started to learn more about the environmental impacts, learning that each photo generated by Midjourney is about the same energy as fully charging a phone, or each interaction with ChatGPT uses about 16 fluid ounces of water to cool down those compute resources. So it's this idea of good and bad. And so I think when we look at AI as a whole, one of the things we're starting to sort of finally be able to contextualize is that it's this duopoly, this two sides, right? AI is out to get you, steal your job, destroy society, but at the same time, it can find you the best deals on travel and plan your perfect itinerary. And so you're kind of stuck as a business owner, as a business user of these tools, trying to figure out, can it do that? Can it not do that? Where can I find this level of trust? And you hear stories about the Avianca, the lawyer that, Avianca case that had ChatGPT write his legal brief and turned it in, felt great about it, but wasn't able to validate that case law. And then the judge comes at him basically saying, these are all made up citations. And so this is an example of where, you may have an easy, quick solution, but not able to validate that information. One thing that happened to me recently was I live in Florida. I like to go fishing. Red snapper season is usually in the summer, so I figured I should check and see if they've released the dates yet. So one day I go to Google, it tells me it's April 15th. Later on that day, or the next day, it tells me it's June 1st. I then go to Perplexity. It actually gets it right and tells me it hasn't been announced yet, and then I have to end up validating that. So if I took the generative search answers from Google at their word, I could have gone fishing, caught some red snapper, and then ended up in jail because it is a pretty big offense here in Florida. It's a very limited season. And so this is a reason that as we look at how we use AI within our business, within our clients' businesses, this idea of easy validation, The ability to instantly validate answers is becoming so key to how we do things. And so for us, it's sort of like, do we trust AI in this space? Can travelers trust AI? And will using AI erode the trust in your organization with travelers? And so in order for us to sort of have a guideline or a roadmap within Miles and within our clients, we sort of have these do's and don'ts that we've been working around, right? Do use AI for ideation, not the final product. An example of that would be generative subheadings and slides. Great use, right? We like to prioritize source references. An example of this would be that Perplexity screenshot. It had 7 sources for its information. We also believe that you should create a budget to test new products and services to understand how they work for you. A few examples for us over the last course of the year in doing this is working with Marinad and Tenfold to do pilot programs to see exactly how answers come back, where we should use things, where we shouldn't use things, what do we need to tweak to make it accurate to the best of our abilities, and weigh that sort of dichotomy between, is it useful or is it 100% accurate? Because what we found is something that's 100% accurate usually isn't that useful. And so that you have to sort of balance your risk tolerance between whatever you're doing. We've also worked with Google's Gen App Builder, which we see a lot of great progress in, and we like that system, the ability to sort of have different agents, ability to plug things in. I will also say that while for all its benefits, it uses a very antiquated system, an IVR, interactive voice routing system, as its platform, which can be extremely frustrating to work in. So you have very advanced things and then very old, frustrating technology as the wrapper around it. We've worked with Performance ML, where we've seen a lot of different benefits, specifically in the media space, identifying MFA sites, creating new audiences. Google has some nice resources around instant BQML that we highly have found pretty effective for our clients. And then finally, we've worked on internal tooling, using things like Microsoft's Copilot to build Streamlit apps so that we can query our own data, figure out how many rows are in a table, what's the max dates or min dates in a table, querying our own data, and then even the idea of, write me a poem about the min-max days. So the ability to do data exploration within your own tables. Finally, outside of the testing, we believe that where AI can be really effective is employing it where answers can be easily validated, but also pairing it with human domain experts. Examples of this could be, I use it personally all the time to write regular expressions. They're extremely powerful within SQL, within Google Analytics, within Python, but the syntax is probably the most frustrating thing to ever remember and use. It does a great job at this. And what's great about it is if it doesn't, I'm validating it instantly. I know whether or not the answer I'm getting back is right or wrong at the exact moment it comes back. And I'm not waiting for the judge to come back and tell me that all of my legal citations are incorrect, right? It's that instant validation that is extremely important to us. Another great use for us is using some of the built-in tools with Adobe to do image masking. It can be extremely tedious to get all of those individual flyaway hairs within a photo. AI can take it with about 98% of that and automate for us, and then just use a couple extra minutes to go and get the ones that it may have missed. Extremely useful. But none of that will do any good if you don't know what questions to ask. If you need to know that you need a regular expression to solve this problem, or you need to know how to do an image mask. And so it's that combination of domain expertise and AI that we're seeing the most benefits within our organization. Finally, some don'ts for us. We don't like to rely on AI for final work product. It's great to have influence, ideation. We don't like to operate without a plan, and we don't like to expect factual answers every single time because we have been disappointed. I like this article from SEO Travel. It's a UK SEO company. Basically, they found that 90% of AI travel itineraries are inaccurate. And I liked the fact that nearly 1 in 4 recommend going to at least one restaurant, cafe, or attraction that is permanently closed or closed until further notice. Or 30% include a Michelin star restaurant, which is probably not something that everyone can afford or even get. And so this idea that we are relying on this thing that, again, is going to destroy society to give us these perfect travel itineraries is something that we have to figure out how to balance. It's this idea that it can assist someone very well, but if we're 100% reliant on it, it may not be right every time. And are we willing to have that trust eroded with our travelers? Finally, we think it's very important not to conceal your usage. If you are going to be using artificially generated content or LLMs to help assist, it's good to put that out there. BBC, Lego have also gotten in trouble for some of these recently with Lego's agency doing a bunch of Ninjago posters that were AI generated and ultimately having to pull those back, right? And so we believe that being forthright and knowing that what content is and isn't AI generated is extremely important to help facilitate that trust with individuals. Finally, we don't believe that you should bet the farm on AI to solve your challenges. There was a recent article by The Telegraph in the UK about how AI can do a better job writing tourist board slogans. It got a little bit of press on After Midnight on CBS, where a destination expert basically went through and said that they preferred AI to choose your destination slogans over a human. And what we can see is this is fun. This is sort of a nice parlor trick, and it's great for ideation, but it's one of those things where these things haven't been tested. We don't know exactly how they're going to play out. We don't know if stakeholders are going to like them. So it's only part of the process, and it's a great beginning piece, but it's not something that's going to get us all the way there. So these are our do's and don'ts. And then finally, just a little bit about what's next. Mike mentioned this. We do see the future as agentic, the idea that there are agents going out and helping solve some of these validation problems that I bring up today. I think for us, we see the coding aspect of this is really a great one because you can get that instant validation and you can automate that validation. Things that LangChain have put out with Langsmith, LangServe, and just LangChain in general, as well as the integration of that into some of the new stuff from Microsoft, AutoDev, sort of the next generation of Copilot, are things that we're really excited about because we can pair that domain expertise in the programming space with AI assistance. You can really be a lot more productive than having that engineer that typically has to go to Stack Overflow 400 times within a project to check a piece of code, really get to that next step much faster. So if this is stuff that you're interested in, we are doing an AI opener for destinations with our partners at Group Now. You can find more information about it here, and then we're going to get into the panel at this point.
Okay, wonderful. Great. Thanks so much for that really comprehensive roundup. Appreciate that. So now let's bring our panelists in. We are really delighted to have our three panelists. We have Smith Kodio from Microsoft, Kara Franker from Visit Estes Park, and Marina Petrova from Intentful. And I think, why don't we just start with each of you just telling us very briefly about your role and a little bit about your work with generative AI in the last year. And Smith, maybe if you want to get us started.
Sure. Thank you, Mitra. Really very appreciative and honored to be here to share what we at Microsoft we're doing and also my role at Microsoft. So my name is Smith Kodio. I'm part of the manufacturing and mobility industry team at Microsoft. So my specific area of focus is around all the work that we do to support customer and also AI across all the subverticals within manufacturing and mobility. So as you can imagine, the last 2 years have been very busy.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about that and what you're hearing from some of those partners. Kara, can you tell us a bit about your role and just briefly your work with generative AI?
Absolutely. So my name is Kara Franker, and I'm the CEO of Visit Estes Park. To help you with where that's located, it's at the gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. So we are a national park destination, and we jumped into AI with both feet in the beginning. Part of that was with a partnership with Marina and Intentful. And with her company, we built out an internal facing AI tool. It's called Happy Places, and I'm sure she'll talk to you more about it. But basically, that's what we use for our team to be more efficient. Coming up with SEO for the back of a blog post, coming up with blog post ideas, coming up with whatever information that can make the marketing team quick and nimble. It's worked really well. My team uses it weekly, and we've found that it makes them more efficient. On the consumer side, we jumped in the very beginning with Matador Network's Guide Geek. I don't know if you guys have tested that out before, but it's very interesting because what you do is you train your own white label version. Ours is called Rocky Mountain Roamer. And what you do is you teach it all about your destination. You actually prioritize the websites that it pulls from. So if you want your DMO website to be #1, you can make it that. Like for us, it's also the National Park, it's also the Colorado Tourism Office and others. And then what you do is you train it and you promote it so that folks are interacting with it kind of like they would like a travel agent. They're asking questions. And the interesting thing about it is you can do it either on your website like a chat bot, which we have, but you can also communicate via text. So that could be through Facebook Messenger or Instagram Messenger and various ways. So we've been testing out both. We've experienced some failures and we've experienced some successes, but we just thought we would jump in with both feet and kind of figure out where we could go. And then later, I think we'll talk to you guys about a white paper we have that kind of details both of those pieces that we put together so that if anybody wants to take a look at it, you can in greater detail. I'm also a lawyer and work closely with Roxanne Steinhoff, who has her own law firm. And so she and I just came up with ideas that we needed to be thinking about from a legal and ethical perspective as well, which I know we'll dive into deeper as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, a lot of great information there. Thank you so much, Kara. And Marina Petrova from Intentful.
Hi, thanks, Kara. Thank you for mentioning us. So I am the CEO of Intentful, a Gen AI company. We started 3 years ago. And what we do is we create AI models that are specific to our client's business. So it's an AI model that knows the facts, the use cases, the business that are specific to a destination or a travel company or to any business. And I would like to support what Gray said about the importance of having a human in the loop. And we like looking at this as co-intelligence, where you rely on AI to do a lot of things, but you still, it is so important to have a human in the loop. And that's how we have been building our products. For the travel industry, we have 2 products, Happy Places that Kara mentioned, which is an AI-powered content creation platform that knows the destination and all of the facts and style and voice, and it becomes that co-intelligent assistant for the marketing teams to create content. And the other product, we call it Know It All. It is relatively new. It is conversational search for the website. So for the user, instead of clicking through hundreds or thousands of pages, when they want to quickly find the information in a natural language and a conversational language, they would ask, what are the things to do today with a 5-year-old kid? And is this place kid friendly? Or what are the things to do next weekend? Or are there any concerts in May and things like that? And it also speaks multiple languages, I think up to 90 languages, while you don't need to spend a single dollar on translations. We work with the travel brands, but we also work with the companies all over the world and other industries as well. And Intentful was recently acquired by a Swiss-based company called GMS. So we've been on an interesting journey of scaling globally, and also happy to share today some of the use cases of what we see happening, not just in travel, but outside of the industry. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, that would be very helpful to hear, I think, because there's certainly a lot of learnings elsewhere for sure. Before we really get into our discussion, I also just have one kind of quick rapid fire question for each of you with maybe just a couple word response. You know, all of you have really been immersed in this world in various ways in the last year and a half, certainly as ChatGPT has come to the fore and all of the other tools. What is one thing that you would say that you know now about generative AI that you didn't know maybe in early 2023? Kara, and anything that comes to mind, like what is one kind of key learning that you've had?
I think that I didn't realize like how much it would give my team superpowers. Like
Okay.
I didn't understand the full 360 and I think I still don't understand like what the future is going to hold for it. But what it's done for my team has been so huge, and so that's more than a few words. So I'll stop it there.
No, that's great. That's great. Marina, why don't you take us?
Yeah, for me, the learning was not only about the AI, because there is always something that keeps amazing you every single day. Like, you know, I've been doing this for 3 years, but every morning I just get amazed by what's possible. My key observation and learning is how we as humans adapt to the change, and how sometimes the adoption can go fast and sometimes it doesn't. So the most interesting learning was how humans interact with AI and how many interesting things are still ahead of us. And most likely, you know, historians will be coming back to our time and saying, oh my God, this was the moment when people started understanding what change really is, because it is a new form of intelligence that coexists with us now.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That intersection of the humans and the technology, I think, is a key piece of it. And Smith, clearly you live in this world every day. So anything that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put a technology lens to this. So we at Microsoft, we believe that we're in the middle of the next platform shift. And what that really means for us, it's if I were to draw kind of something, in the air right now. So on the left, think about natural language. For decades, we technology providers, we've been chasing, finding ways for human to interact with machines using natural language. We finally, with the advent of generative AI, where we now the right computing, resources and the algorithm, why that can actually help make that happen. So that's a very unique thing that is happening in technology. And then on the right, think about what we call reasoning engine. So the traditional search, when you do a keyword search, you get a bunch of links and you get lost after 20 clicks. Now you actually can start with an outcome, and then the AI will actually help you get there. This is what we call reducing the cognitive load on the on the user. So that's a huge shift in terms of how users can be productive in leveraging the technology. So we don't want to just put a technology out there for the sake of it, but we see a shift happening in how users will be able to interact with systems, how they're going to be able to gain value from the technology. And then the middle part, which is data. So I think Greg did a great job in kind of calling out the risk involved in just relying on output that came from foundational model or large language models. But for us, one of the things that we do is to help you bring data that you can trust. This is what we call first-party data, that you can embed into the process of querying the AI models so you can get more accurate outcome. So this is really what we see. That's kind of my view on that. And when I see that is changing, that I didn't think was possible, a few years ago.
Wonderful. And so Smith, let's continue. I want to continue chatting with you for just a moment. I'm curious, what are you hearing from some of your travel partners? What are you seeing as far as opportunities and success stories or challenges?
Great questions. As you can imagine, in my role as a director of customer experience and AI, I work with folks from travel, transport, logistics, you name it. It's part of my portfolio of customers that I travel the world to meet, including the partners building solution on the Microsoft stack. So I think the first thing that I heard from customers, it's about how they can protect the data. Because in many of those companies that have been in business for 20, 40 years, they have a lot of unique data sets, call it the secret sauce. So they want to take advantage of this big wave of AI change that's happening, but they also want to make sure that they have the right protections in place, how to manage that, how to prevent data leak and stuff like that. So those are some of the things that we see around data. And then it's about security, right? Also, the impact that can have, from the workforce and the change management that are needed to make sure that you help folks transition into this new world of generative AI and AI really being that kind of co-pilot, helping users be more productive and more efficient at the world. So those are some of the themes that I see across the verticals, really.
And Copilot is now in every Microsoft productivity tool. Is that right?
That is correct. So Copilot for us is not a product. It's when you link that to a set of business outcome like capabilities, and that's when it becomes a product. But for us, it's that human in the loop. Is the idea that you don't need to start from a blank slate, right? We help you get started, and that's what we really see the productivity gain and people actually really thinking, be more creative. Believe it or not, I had an executive briefing with the head of design from one of our car manufacturers, and this is a very well-renowned designer, like really known in the industry. And he said, I can't believe I'm about to make that statement that for once in a lifetime technology, like designers actually really love technology to that extent, because in his case, the use case that he called out is the fact that now the designers can generate a set of prompts that give them, like a model car, for instance. And then using that now in the CAD system, now they can actually tweak it versus starting from scratch, think about all different ways. Now you can describe what your outcome should be, and then you can go do your creativity. This is when you bring like that, make unique, human unique. And that for him, that's a very big change in the way these designers are designing new cars.
Yeah, Very interesting. I think that speaks to kind of what Kara was referring to about how it has really like turbocharged some of her internal work. So super interesting. Marina, I know that you interact with a lot of DMOs and others in the travel and entertainment industries who are investing in AI. Can you just give us a sense of what you are hearing and seeing from them and how it's being used?
So with DMOs and the travel industry, but also with all of the companies all over the world, we're seeing pretty much the same approach. So most companies are still at the very, very early stages and trying to understand where and how. I call it that we see that everyone is finally moving from the hype stage to, so what can I actually do with it? And then there are two streams. One is operational efficiency, how AI can be used to save time, to save money, to do more. So everything that is internal. And then the other stream is all of the new revenue opportunities, because there are multiple ways how AI can be integrated into existing products that increases the revenue opportunities for the company. The second one is still relatively new, and there are mostly POCs there. But that's the first one. The second thing is in terms of the use cases. So knowledge retrieval is something that is super, super common. Everyone wants to get access to the information quickly, and that we see this also internal and external. All things marketing, data analytics, and what I also like calling being able to talk to your data, where you have lots of information, lots of reports, but normally it is just data scientists and analysts who can deal with this. Now, pretty much everyone, by using a conversational interface with a model that knows that data, where this data is uploaded, whether using Copilot or something like that, or any other product, can ask questions and dig deep into every single detail of the data point that is available. These are some of the core, so knowledge retrieval, marketing, customer service, of course, and data analytics. That's what we see all over the world now.
Yeah, really interesting. Would you say, can you give us a sense how you see some of the travel industry stakeholders comparing to maybe some other sectors and industries that you work with, as far as kind of willingness to test and use these tools, or, you know, excitement about it?
It's a great question. So I would say that definitely the interest that is, like, every single company in the travel space definitely has interest to the AI. And what I have been seeing so far is that the travel industry is actually a little bit more ahead than some of the other companies. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is because the use cases are so obvious and so clear, because you know that you can get started. This is where my pain point is, and this is where I will apply it and start doing. Whereas with other industries, there is still a lot of discovery and a lot of, so what do we do, how and where do we apply it? So it's been fantastic to see the adoption in the travel industry, and we're seeing more and more interest for sure.
Yeah, you know, that aligns with the fact that from day one, as this news has been rolling out, there's almost always a travel example in the demos that you see about how this technology can be put to use. So that certainly speaks to that. Kara, maybe if you can jump in and tell us a bit more about this tool that you have, and what kind of adoption you're seeing. You know, that's, as we said early on, kind of the big question is, how are consumers feeling about engaging with some of these tools? And then I know you mentioned some research that you've done. We'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, as the leader of a DMO that's small, so we're a team of 11, trying to leverage our team in the best possible way with a budget that's not as big as some of the huge destinations is really key for me. And so working with Intentful on the internal side of how to make the team quicker. And so I know a lot of people are like, oh no, what does this mean for jobs? And what we're finding as our team is using it every single day is that there's never a time, and this kind of goes back to what Gray said too, where you can just cut out the human, because the human touch and the human element is so key. What it is like turbocharging your team so that the marketing team can do so much more than they would. And whether that's from a brainstorming perspective, and then doing it in a way, like Smith was talking about, the security of your data. So that, like, when we're asking intentful questions. We've already trained it on our destination, and it's not just going into the ether. And so it's kind of a safer place. And that's where we start really thinking about data inputs and outputs. And that's where I put the attorney hat on, because what you put into any of these tools, where does it go? How is it used? What does it mean for copyrights? What does it mean for trademarks? And then what comes out of it? And so that's a little bit of what Roxanne Steinhoff, the attorney that I mentioned, who is deeply involved in the travel industry. She came from Civitas. She has her own law firm. She's incredibly whip smart, where we're asking these questions, and it starts with inputs and output. What data are you putting in? And there's some just like absolute no's. You don't want to put your visitor data into anything right now because you don't know what's going to happen to it. You don't want to put your logo and ask it to, oh, can you tweak this or change this? And like for us, can you put an elk in our logo? The second that you do that, you might lose your trademark or your protection on your logo. So we're asking those questions in this paper that I think everybody's going to get. And what I hope it does is, instead of scare people from the legal and ethical piece of it, is ask for industry guidelines. So Microsoft has them, Google has them, where it's kind of like a code of ethics of when you're using the tool, what are the things that you need to think about? And if we can get that for the travel industry and for DMOs in particular, I think it might help some of the leaders in the DMO space kind of say, okay, at least I know we're not going to put visitor data in there. We're not going to, ask it to use Scarlett Johansson in an advertisement for us, because that could be a really bad idea. And we might want to also tell people when we're using AI in a sense so that they know what they're getting. So I think those industry guidelines are going to be key. That's like, just to kind of tell you what the paper's about, besides asking those questions, that's the end game, is can we get a set of industry guidelines that help guide us? And then from an external perspective, I mean, this goes back to what Mike was talking about in the beginning, where he's like, okay, what happens when we come up with these autonomous robots that are doing things for us and helping us plan our trip? I think we need to be thinking so far ahead, and what does it mean for our key performance indicators and how do they change? We know we're counting website clicks. We know we're counting social media interactions. Ultimately, we want people to go down the funnel and book. Is it possible that a tool like GuideGeek or Copilot or others could help take the traveler down that journey where they book? And how do we analyze that in a way? Because we all know that we're constantly on fire about what are we doing for our stakeholders? What are we doing for our communities? And then how are we communicating that piece? And does that mean that KPIs change as we go forward? So those are all the questions that we're asking, and I won't pretend to have all of the answers, but at least if we're kind of trying to figure out that together, and I think if we get more people, jumping off of the bench and saying, okay, let's try some things out, I think that'll be good for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I'll say it speaks to the value of events like this that can bring together a variety of voices and share learnings for sure. So yeah, and actually just a quick question that came in from the audience, Kara, specifically for you. Have you been able to reduce your expenses, not in the way of staffing and your people expenses, but have you been able to reduce any other line items in your budget by integrating that tool?
That's a great question. I would say not in a sense where I can go to my board and say, look, the money that we're investing in AI has contradicted what we were investing here. We started pulling back our magazine, our traveler guide already before we started with the AI, but we've kind of shifted the budget towards that. So we're putting more money into our website. The way that I see the website now and content is more important than ever. We might be going back to the time when content was king, or maybe it has always been king. Because that information on your website is going to feed into all of these different AI tools and the one that you build internally if you do that like we have. So to me, I hate to say this because I love print. And I love feeling the paper in my hands. And I'm the editor-in-chief, I'm a former editor-in-chief of magazines, and I still do it now. But I think this continues the shift towards making sure that the information on your website is really good.
Yeah. So, and then that leads into another question that I had, because it's one that we hear again and again, and maybe Smith, if you can start us off as we talk about this, is just what advice might you have for those in the audience about how to boost their visibility in a world of an LLM driven search? You know, what are some of the key things that they should be keeping in mind to show up in that search?
Good question. I guess I'll use an example that is public, so I can use the name, not specifically a travel example, but that can be extrapolated and also applied to this audience. So Microsoft will be working with CarMax, which is one of the automotive retail giant selling used cars out there. Probably most of you might leverage them at some point in time. So a few years ago, they were one of the early adopters of our Azure OpenAI services. So if you think key things I want to call out here, I agree with Karen in terms of don't go put your data in any tool. So this is why Microsoft, we're investing billions of dollars a quarter to make sure that we built the infrastructure, we built the right responsible AI framework to make sure that this is what we call your guest, your workforce, your data. So whatever you put on that stays within the boundaries of your tenant, so to speak, right? So in terms of what we see, like customer like CarMax, what they've done, they had like what almost 11 years worth of content, reviews about used cars and stuff like that. So typically, from a customer journey perspective, a user will spend days or weeks researching a car. So what they've done using our large language models hosted on Microsoft Azure, they're able to create summaries that form hundreds of sources and provide that as a nice kind of summary and output next to the vehicle. So that basically helps the user, instead of spending days, researching, what they get is a good summarization of 10 years of data that they have. So what happened now, the content team, the editing team, now they're using also the LLM to optimize for search optimizations, creating more relevant content to the product. So those are some of the things that we see how using your first party data that you already have, but it would take manually, if you don't have the AI, many years to process to come up with the right kind of set of streams that you can leverage. Now using the LLM, you can actually speed that up. Things that could take 10 years, you can do it in days. Now the content team can focus on what they're really good at versus things that the machine can handle for them. So this is kind of what we see, and that can apply here in this audience, for this audience.
Okay, yeah, certainly that's something we've heard about. How do you become the answer in a world where it's all about natural language questions and responses and not just links, right?
Exactly.
Marina, any other thoughts on that? I'm sure you do.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to add to that because we are now entering a new time where we can get more insights. So let's not use the first party data, let's anonymize it, right? So it becomes a cycle. So using, for example, the conversational search, which we are now going to see everywhere. Amazon already introduced it. We see it obviously in Google and ChatGPT everywhere. So it is such a fantastic source of the insights because you can see what your customers, what your visitors, what your users are actually interested in, not what we as subjective content creators think it might be a good idea to put there, but what are the questions that people ask. And then it becomes a cycle. So you get those anonymized, I emphasize, anonymized questions, and that informs the content strategy. And that information goes into the type of content that you need to create, and you can analyze it, see how people engage, and then the cycle repeats again. And that way you stay relevant and you use AI both for analysis, for the conversational search as well, and to assist in content creation. I think this is fascinating. This is what we're going to see more. Again, human needs to be in the loop. Super important. We are not ready to hand it off to the AI. But I have a feeling that we will be getting more and more relevant content because until now, most of the content was basically built on the subjective understanding of what needs to be put on the website.
Super helpful as we are starting to get to the end of our time. But one question that's come in that Kara, I think maybe you are best equipped to answer, and that would be, what can you give us a sense or tips for others out there on what language to use or what you would suggest to help convince a state or a city government agency or DMO leaders to address any fears about AI technology and toward more of an openness to embracing the possibilities?
Absolutely. So Visit Estes Park is a governmental agency. It's not a 501c6 like a lot of DMOs are. And we report to both the county and the town of Estes Park. And so this is key. And what we always have to run through is what do politicians look for? They look for votes. They look for saving money. They look for saving jobs. So you can spin AI into any one of those arguments based on what you know about your politicians locally. Right now, is it jobs? Say, actually, this gives my team superpowers. You want to see us get more output than we ever have and invest in our team, then AI can help us do that. If it's about, other aspects in the community. And then also I would recommend looking at Destination International's lexicon, because they focus so much on community words. And I think that there's ways that you could just slide that into your argument with your local politicians to get support. And then I'll tell you what we're doing too. So as part of this webinar, we're going to share the 2 resources that we've just published this week. And then we had our PR firm go ahead and package that up into a nice press release that we're going to send out to our local paper, and then also to our politicians and to those that are looking at what we're doing. And then also, what does it do? It makes them look like they're on the forefront, like little Estes Park, Colorado on the forefront of some big things. So anything, you guys know how it works with politicians, anything that you can do to help boost their platform, that's what they're going to want to hear first.
Yeah, super great tips there.
I mean, broadly and globally, one of the things that we at Microsoft have been doing, that is the work that Brad Smith, who's our chief legal officer, has been doing, of course, with government all over the world, is to kind of be more proactive. Like in the US, for instance, where we work with the US government, and there's a framework that the US government published in terms of responsible AI, and also from a procurement perspective, who met those conditions that they should procure, AI solution from. So that built on a stack that basically they can trust. So this is where players like Microsoft, we are trying to basically stay ahead of that to make sure that we can remove some of those barriers. So that way, folks who are building solutions in the market can actually, they don't need to go through all the, roadblocks to convince politicians or a county to buy the solution. Building on the stack, we've done the legwork for you already to make it easier for you. So in the procurement process, you can show that you follow the guidelines and the right steps from the government, so you can actually close the deal.
Yeah, super helpful. That's great to know that. All right. Well, clearly there's a lot to discuss on this topic, and unfortunately we are out of time, at least for this webinar. So I want to now hand it back over to Gray for Miles for just a quick wrap up for us.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here, all the great sort of answers from our panel, and Mitra and Mike for hosting this. And then also from an additional resource perspective, we have papers that Kara has put together that you can scan the QR code, but also download after, as well as we have some things that Focusrite has. Sorry, we have some resources there, and then what we have from Focusrite coming up in the future.
Yes, for sure. And as we said, this entire webinar will be sent to everyone that registered in the next few days. So you'll be able to go back and re-listen and scan these codes and things such as that. So we encourage you to join us in Barcelona in June for Focusrite Europe. And of course, as you saw on that other slide, and you can access to sign up for the FocusWire newsletter to stay on top of all of our coverage of generative AI. Thanks to all of our panelists. Thanks to Mike and Gray, and have a great day, everybody.